I'm Sora Carter. I'm 30. And the first thing I asked when I woke up in that hospital wasn't about the pain. It was, did anyone come? They hadn't. Not my mother, not my father, not even a card with my name spelled wrong. For 3 days, machines kept me alive. And in those 3 days, my family decided I wasn't worth the drive. I used to think silence was strength, that if I stayed small, stayed useful, stayed invisible, maybe they'd remember I was there. But silence doesn't protect you. It just gives them room to forget you exist. And they did. Until Aunt Maggie died. Until the will was read. Until they realized what she left behind, and to whom. Before I tell you what I did with it, where are you watching from? Hit that like button if you've ever been treated like nothing. Until you had something they wanted. Because trust me, this story isn't about revenge. It's about receipts. The ceiling was an off-white blur as I blinked myself back into reality. Tubes pressed against my arms, something cold clipped to my finger, and the steady beep 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 of a monitor told me I was still alive even if I didn't feel it. My lips cracked as I turned my head, eyes stinging. The room smelled like antiseptic and rain. Outside the window, Santa Rosa was shrouded in gray. I tried to move. Pain exploded in my ribs. My voice came out in a rasp. Hello? My throat felt like sandpaper. Is anyone here? The curtain rustled. A nurse mid-30s maybe stepped in. Her badge read, Mackenzie, her eyes soft but tired. She checked the machines without looking directly at me. How long was I out? 3 days, she said quietly, still avoiding my eyes. Did anyone come? My voice trembled against the weight of the question. She paused as if she hadn't heard, but she had. The air changed. I'll get Dr. Daniels, she murmured and left. My chest tightened. Not from the bruised ribs, from the silence. I turned my head to the right. No flowers, no cards. No, just a stack of untouched hospital tissues and a half-empty pitcher of water. When I closed my eyes, all I saw was that moment again, my college graduation. Me standing at the podium, diploma in hand, about to speak. Mom nudging Dad as they slipped out, thinking I wouldn't notice. They had somewhere more important to be that day, apparently. That was the first time I realized applause meant nothing when the people you love don't bother to clap. Now this Dr. Daniels entered, clipboard in hand. He had the look of someone who'd seen too many bodies stitched together, too many hearts break under fluorescent lights. You're lucky, he said. A few inches lower and that piece of guardrail would have pierced your lung. Car accident. My voice cracked. Single vehicle. You swerved off 101 in the rain. No alcohol in your system. They think it was a deer. I couldn't remember. Just flashes, taillights, screeching brakes, and then silence. He continued, there are some serious fractures. You'll need rehab. And the cost, well, we'll need to speak with your family about that. My mouth went dry. I can call my dad, I offered weakly. He handed me a phone. It rang, and rang. Then it clicked. Carter residence, came his voice. Even after all these years, it still startled me how cold he could sound saying something so mundane. Dad, it's me, Maddie. Pause. Oh, you're awake? My stomach twisted. Yeah, the doctor said I was out for 3 days. I see. I was just wondering, did you know I was here? Another pause, this one longer. He sighed. They told me. The hospital called. I swallowed, and no one came. You're 30 now, Maddie. You've made it clear you don't need us. Dad, he cut me off. If you're alive, you can figure it out yourself. You always wanted to be independent. Click. I stared at the screen. The room didn't feel cold anymore. It felt hollow. Nurse Mackenzie returned. Her hands trembled as she adjusted my IV. She didn't speak, but her eyes said she'd heard everything. She gave a small shake of her head, almost imperceptible. I looked up at the ceiling again. The off-white blur had hardened into something sharp. They let me die, and I survived anyway. I didn't know the dead could leave doors open, until Aunt Maggie did. The receptionist led me into a room lined with glass bookshelves and the quiet scent of cedar. Elise Keene's office sat like a fortress in the middle of downtown Santa Rosa, its gray stone exterior almost too heavy for what was about to unfold inside. I could still hear the rain on the windows from the street below December, pressing in with its cold breath. Elise stood as I entered, tall and composed in a navy blazer that probably cost more than my monthly rent used to. Her eyes met mine with something between professionalism and empathy. "Sora Carter?" she asked. I nodded. My voice had been thin lately, thin like everything else I used to believe in. "Thank you for coming in. Please sit." I lowered myself into the leather chair across from her desk, the cushion firm, unfamiliar. Her mahogany desk was clean, except for a manila folder, a single silver pen, and a navy envelope sealed in red wax. "We're here about the estate of Margaret Whitlock," she began. I flinched. I hadn't heard her full name said out loud in years. To me, she was always just Aunt Maggie. Elise continued, her voice clear and precise. "You're the sole beneficiary of her will." I blinked. I'm what? She left you everything. The house on Bennett Ridge, her investment portfolio, and full rights to a private credit consultancy she founded 10 years ago under an anonymous shell. My jaw went slack. That doesn't make any sense. We weren't close. I mean, not like family should be. Elise lifted the navy envelope and gently pushed it across the desk toward me. "She also left you this. Handwritten." My hands hesitated before picking it up. I broke the wax seal slowly, almost afraid the ink might smudge with my touch. Aunt Maggie's cursive curved across the paper like vines, elegant, deliberate. "To the only one in this family who knows what pain feels like, you once told me your silence was your shield, that you preferred invisibility. I told you the world often overlooks what it can't define. I watched them chip away at you piece by piece, your voice, your choices, your worth. I couldn't stop them. But I can give you something now. Use this to build something that's yours. Leave the rest behind." My chest tightened. A memory came unbidden, her fingers brushing a curl from my face when I was 12, the way she'd looked at me during Thanksgiving when no one else had noticed I wasn't eating. She always noticed, even when she didn't speak. My voice cracked. "I don't understand why me." Elise folded her hands. Ms. Whitlock had no children, no spouse, and minimal ties to other relatives. She was selective. And she specified clearly that the estate, the finances, and her name go to you, only you. There was a silence between us, thick, but not hostile. I stared at the letter again. My hands shook slightly, but not from fear. From something else. Something lighter. "She saw me," I whispered. Elise gave a small nod. She did. I looked up at her, the question forming before I could stop it. Did she know my parents left me in a hospital bed? The lawyer paused, tilting her head slightly as if weighing what could be said. "I believe," she said gently. She always knew more than she said. "They told me I was a financial mistake. Turns out they made a bigger one." The apartment still smelled like yesterday's coffee, its bitterness sunk into the grout between the tiles. The little desk near the window was cluttered with unopened letters, a cracked mug, and my old laptop resurrected now. Only because Aunt Maggie's checkbook had allowed the electricity to stay on. It was the kind of cold December that seeps into your joints no matter how many blankets you pile on. I stared at the screen glowing in front of me, the spreadsheet alive with rows of numbers and links. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, too tired to press down, but too curious to walk away. The numbers didn't lie. Behind me, Talia Brooks leaned on the windowsill, a thermos in her hand and a half grin on her face. She hadn't changed much since law school, same razor-sharp cheekbones, same no-bullshit tone. But her suit was sleeker now, her heels louder. She had become exactly the woman people once told me I could never be. "You're not going to believe this," she said, scrolling on her phone. "Your dad's name is on a mortgage dated 2019. The property's still active, no record of final payoff." I blinked. What they paid that house off in the early 2000s. That's what they told everyone. That's what they bragged about. "Well," she said, tossing her phone to me, "they lied." I scrolled through the county record summary. The address was unmistakable. 117 Willow Glen Court. The house with the green shutters and ceramic angel over the fireplace. My childhood home. Or at least the one they wanted everyone to believe I never deserved to return to. The mortgage was pulled after you left art school, Talia continued. I cross-referenced the lender. Want to know the fun part? I looked up. She was smiling like a woman who knew she held the match in the gasoline. It's under a holding company owned by Whitlock Financial Group. My heart thudded. That's part of Maggie's portfolio, I murmured. Talia nodded. Which means I own the debt. She sipped her coffee slowly. You can call the note Maddie. You can ask for full repayment or force foreclosure. I set the phone down carefully like it might explode. And that house they built to keep me out, I could take it back. Neither of us spoke for a long moment. The apartment was quiet except for the soft hum of the radiator and the growing hum in my chest. Legally, they're in default, Talia said softly. They haven't paid in months. You wouldn't even need to confront them. Just serve the papers. My eyes found the window. Rain again. Santa Rosa rarely let you forget the season. I stood and faced her. Then let's do it. Quietly. I didn't call them, I didn't tell anyone, but somehow they found the front door. The knock wasn't loud. In fact, it was hesitant, 3 soft raps like someone unsure if they were welcome or simply hoping the house would answer for them. I was in the kitchen steeping Earl Grey in the porcelain set Aunt Maggie kept locked in her glass cabinet. The French kind, with the thin gold rim and ivy vines that danced around the rim like whispered promises. She only ever used them for guests who mattered. Today, I was using them for ghosts. The mansion was silent otherwise, except for the rain tapping on the windows like an impatient relative. I let the knock go unanswered, then another, firmer. This one came with a voice. Maddie's sweetheart, it's Mom. I didn't move, just watched the tea darken in the cup spirals of heat curling upward like secrets finally speaking aloud. I waited another 10 seconds, then footsteps, heels on marble, and before I could reach the door, it creaked open. They had let themselves in. Susan Carter stood in the entryway, hair, perfectly curled raincoat unbuttoned just enough to show off her cashmere. Behind her, Gregory followed with that same air of casual arrogance, the kind that said the world owed him something. Blake trailed in last shaking rain from his hoodie like a golden retriever who didn't know how to read a room. I stood still, one hand on the teacup. You found the place. Gregory smiled as if we'd been exchanging Christmas cards for years. Maggie had good taste. This view's worth at least $4 million easy. Susan gave the air a pretend sniff. Is that bergamot? I said nothing, just handed her a cup, then poured one for myself. They settled in as if they owned the place. Blake flopped onto the Italian settee like it was his. Susan eyed the artwork on the wall, a charcoal piece I'd done in college. She didn't say anything about it. Maybe she didn't recognize it as mine. So, Gregory leaned back, resting his hands on the carved arms of the chair. Maggie must have been fond of you. All this to you alone. I sipped slowly. She always said family mattered most, he continued, which is why I'm sure she'd want all of us to share in this blessing, right? There it was, not even 15 minutes in. Susan added, We raised you, Maddie. You wouldn't be here if it weren't for everything we sacrificed. I looked at the cup in my hand. You let me die, and now you want to profit off my survival? The silence thickened. For a brief moment, even the rain paused. Gregory's jaw twitched. That's unfair. We had no idea the hospital called. These systems paperwork gets lost. Right, I said. Systems. Blake shifted forward, arms on knees. Don't be dramatic. You owe them. I turned to him, my voice soft but carved from steel. Correction, they owe me. And interest is due. They came to collect. I served them tea instead. The fireplace flickered, casting a warm glow against the stone walls, but the air in the room remained cold, not from the weather, from the weight of what was about to be said. The last day of December always carried a strange silence, like the world was holding its breath before midnight. They were already seated when I walked in, porcelain tray in hand. Susan's fingers were folded tightly in her lap. Gregory's jaw flexed with every tick of the antique clock. Blake pretended not to care, scrolling through his phone, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. I placed the tray down slowly, the clink of china sounding louder than it should have. Then I sat across from them, legs crossed, spine straight. Calm. Deliberate. This, I said, placing a folded parchment in front of Susan, was written by Aunt Maggie 2 weeks before she died. It's the last courtesy I'll extend. Susan hesitated before opening it. Her eyes scanned the neat cursive, her face unreadable at first, then tightening with every line. Gregory leaned in, snatched the paper, and read aloud. I leave my estate fully and entirely to Sora Carter. No division, no alternate claims. She is the one who understood me, and she is the one who will carry this forward. Margaret Whitlock's silence. Then Gregory's fist hit the armrest. You think this gives you the right to cut your family out after everything we've done? I tilted my head. Everything you've done. He stood now, voice rising. You've always been ungrateful. Ungrateful and dramatic. Maggie was senile. She didn't know what she was doing. I didn't answer. Just poured tea, slow and graceful. The steam curled like smoke from a gun barrel. Susan's voice was low venom behind every syllable. This is petty Maddie. You could have done the decent thing. Split it, shared it. I handed her the teacup. You once said a girl like me wouldn't own more than a coffee mug. Seems I proved you wrong. They stared at me like I'd grown horns. Gregory barked, You're isolating yourself. Again, like always. I set my own cup down with care. You let me rot alone in a hospital bed, and now you want a key to the house, you already lost it. For a moment no one moved. Then Blake stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. Enjoy it while it lasts. He muttered venom in every syllable. That house isn't even fully paid off. He didn't wait for a reply, just turned and left the front door slamming behind him. Gregory and Susan followed without a word. Their pride couldn't stay in the same room as their defeat. I let the silence settle again. Then I picked up my phone. A message from Talia waited on the lock screen. It's done. Mortgage transferred. You're now the lender. I smiled slightly, eyes still fixed on the door they had just walked out of. Exactly. Power isn't in the vaults. It's in the fine print. The office smelled like old ink and sharp determination. Stacks of papers lined the mahogany desk, some neatly sorted into labeled folders, others splayed out like battle plans mid-execution. I sat in the middle of it all, cross-legged in an armchair Maggie once called her thinking throne, lit by soft January light cutting through sheer curtains. 3 screens glowed in front of me, one with a live Zoom call with Talia, another displaying scans of mortgage contracts, and the third blinking with Darla's spreadsheet updates. The mansion had become a quiet war room, and every paper cut was now a weapon. Start with column D, Talia said, brushing back her hair as she clicked something on her end. That's where the hidden transfer fees show up. If he borrowed under an alias or forged a secondary cosigner, it'll be there. I scrolled slowly. The documents weren't just financial. They were confessions wrapped in bureaucracy. There, it was Susan Carter's signature. Twice. One fluid, one shaky, dated 6 months apart. The first one matched older records. The second, not quite. Gregory forged her signature, I murmured. Talia squinted at the image. The notary line is blank. That makes it inadmissible unless they're dumb enough to claim it in court. A new window pinged. Elise Keene's face appeared in a soft, serious square. You've confirmed it, she asked calmly. Yes, I said. The second loan extension was illegal. Maggie never notarized it either. My father took more than he was allowed and lied to his own wife to do it. Darla's chat bubble popped up next. Found the original letter from Maggie Re-Emergency Loans. She warned about misuse. Want it scanned? Yes, I typed before turning back to Elise. So what now? She adjusted her glasses. You have 2 choices. Foreclose and make a scene, or give them the paperwork and let them choke on their own panic. Push them against the wall, don't throw them off the cliff. Yet, Talia raised an eyebrow. Or you do both. Just in order. My fingers hovered over the printed contract on my lap. Everything Maggie had set up, all the pieces she left behind, now pointed here. She hadn't just left me an inheritance. She left me leverage. You're not just holding the knife, Talia said with a grin. You own the kitchen. I ran my fingers over the inked paper. Every loop and clause was a slow, methodical undoing. Not revenge, not anger. Just facts, served cold. I leaned back in the chair, holding the original document up to the light. My voice was almost a whisper, but it filled the room like thunder. Time to see how they bleed. I didn't need to shout. One whisper in the right ear was enough. The room buzzed with laughter and polite lies, clinking glasses and the soft rustle of tailored fabrics. Crystal chandeliers shimmered above, casting a gilded glow over the country club's grand ballroom. It was the first charity event of the year, and everyone who mattered in Santa Rosa was there, especially those desperate to prove they still did. I didn't need to walk through the front door. Not tonight. I stayed behind the velvet partition near the catering alcove, unseen but not uninvolved. My black coat blended with the shadows, my phone held steady, camera lens tucked behind a decorative fern. At the center of the ballroom stood Susan Carter, draped in pale lavender and too many pearls. Her smile was wide but strained. Her posture perfect as always. She greeted Charlotte Ray with a kiss to the cheek, though her eyes darted once briefly to the entrance. Charlotte was the kind of woman who whispered louder than most people shouted, owner of a local news affiliate, queen of gated community gossip. If she heard it, Santa Rosa would believe it, which is why the message had gone to her inbox that morning. Off record. Source says the Carter's mortgage is about to default. Legal action pending. Check the courthouse. Anonymous, of course. But the seed was planted. I heard something strange today. Charlotte began swirling her champagne. A little rumor about a foreclosure. Surely not your address. Susan. Susan's smile didn't crack, but her tone did. That's ridiculous. We're fine. More than fine. Our house is stable. Charlotte tilted her head. Because someone mentioned Maggie Whitlock's estate. Something about a shift in ownership? Susan's hand tightened around her glass. That woman left everything to her niece. We've got nothing to do with any of that. She said it too fast. Blake appeared then, as if summoned by the rising temperature. He looked out of place in a blazer too big, his hair falling into his eyes. He stepped between them, whispering something sharp to Susan, but the mic on my phone caught every word. You said the mortgage was handled. You said it was temporary. Susan hissed back, but Blake raised his voice too loud, too public. Jesus, Mom, you forged her name. Don't talk to me about family shame. The music dipped for a breath. Heads turned. Charlotte raised her eyebrows slightly, her smile razor thin. Blake stormed off, muttering something about being done fixing messes. Susan stood frozen in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by people who now knew just enough to question everything. I stepped back behind the curtain, phone still recording. Then I heard it. Charlotte, low and deliberate, speaking to the woman beside her. It's the daughter, isn't it? The one they forgot? I didn't smile, but the heat in my chest wasn't rage anymore. It was control. Later that night, as the coastal wind howled outside the mansion, my phone rang. Gregory's name flashed across the screen. I let it buzz twice before answering. What the hell are you doing? He growled. I leaned back in the chair, watching the video replay of Blake's outburst. I'm collecting interest. They signed the paper. I just read the fine print. The conference room smelled like pine-scented floor wax and new toner. Sunlight barely reached the window. It was one of those cold January afternoons when everything looked filtered through parchment. Elise Keene sat at the head of the table in her trademark black turtleneck, glasses perched low on her nose, reviewing the final envelope. Her assistant, a solemn young man in navy slacks, waited by the copier with a seal stamp in hand. I leaned forward and signed. 3 copies, initialed at every corner, notarized, dated, numbered. Talia let out a low whistle from across the table. Well, it's official. The Carter family now has 30 days to pay off the note, or face criminal forgery proceedings. Plus interest. She tapped her pen against the table. And we're charging them gently. You're doing them a favor, Maddie. It won't feel like one, I murmured, watching Elise slip the signed copies into a thick envelope. They forged your mother's signature on a second loan, Elise said, sliding the packet to her assistant. You inherited the debt. You are fully within legal bounds to request a repayment or trigger a forced sale. The legal mailman arrived on cue, a middle-aged man in a red tie and precise steps. Elise handed over the stamped envelope like it was a surgical instrument. Priority service. Signature required. she said. I stared at the envelope for a long second before it disappeared into his briefcase. They thought erasing me was their final act. I said softly, more to myself than to the room. I'm just getting started. Talia's smile was tight. You're playing by the book, but the game's about to get messy. As the door clicked shut behind the mailman, Elise packed up the remainder of her files. We'll hear from them soon. They won't ignore this, not with their house on the line. My phone buzzed once, then again. I glanced at the screen. Subject urgent. Legal response filed from Elise Keene. Legal team message, they've hired counsel. Responding within the week. I read it twice. Talia reached over and took my phone, scanning the message. They're going to fight. She looked up, eyes sharp. Dirty. They couldn't beat me with truth, so they came with lies. The manila envelope trembled slightly in my hand, not from its weight, but from the fire it carried inside. I sat on the bench outside the local law enforcement building, staring down at my name typed in bold legal font. The header was unmistakable: petition for mental capacity review. Filed by Gregory Carter. Supported by Susan Carter. They hadn't just come to fight. They came to erase me. Again. I opened the folder slowly. The chill of February cutting through my coat sleeves as Elise stood silently beside me. She didn't say a word while I read the first paragraph. Then the second. Then the signature. The petition claimed I was emotionally volatile, prone to delusion, and financially reckless due to post-coma trauma. They had even attached a scanned letter, Susan's words neatly typed and cruelly composed, sent to Maggie's former business partners. Our daughter has always struggled with reality. We only wish to protect what Maggie worked so hard to build. My stomach turned. They're accusing me of being unfit, I whispered, voice raw. They want me labeled incompetent so they can take the portfolio. Elise nodded, her jaw tight. They're going for a conservatorship angle. If they can convince a judge you're not of sound mind, they could freeze your assets. Maybe even overturn the will. I laughed. Short, bitter, broken. This is what I get for surviving. They didn't come to the hospital, Elise. Not once. And now they're here trying to lock me out of my own life. She reached over, steadying my hand. You don't respond. Not yet. That's what they want. Let them flail first. We'll move when they think you're cornered. I closed the folder and looked out across the parking lot. The wind picked up, rattling the leaves of a dying oak nearby. Suddenly I was 10 again, sitting in the back seat of the family car after school, listening to my mother explain why she was sending me to therapy. You make up stories. It's not normal. But they weren't stories. They were just truths she didn't like. They called me unstable, I murmured, when all I did was survive. Elise said nothing, and I didn't need her to. The silence between us was louder than anything inside that courthouse. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A single message from Talia. You're not alone. I found something. I sat straighter. The cold didn't feel so sharp anymore. They wanted me silent, but the dead kept receipts. The attic groaned above my head like an old lung struggling for air. Wind howled through the vents, rain clawing against the roof in a slow, angry rhythm. My flashlight cut through dust and cobwebs as I stepped carefully across the wooden beams, heart pounding like a second storm. I'd almost missed it. A worn cedar box tucked beneath a moth-eaten quilt in the corner, latched but not locked. I dragged it out the hinges, moaning in protest. Inside were old postcards, a pair of rusted scissors, a tin of dried lavender, and beneath them all a mini cassette tape labeled in Maggie's cursive Carter. June 2021. My throat tightened. I brought it down to the study hands, shaking slightly as I slipped it into the small player Elise had brought me weeks ago just in case. I called her before hitting play. She picked up on the second ring. Found something? Yeah, Maggie left a recording. It's him, Gregory. A pause. Play it. I pressed the button. Static crackled, then her voice, Maggie's, low and deliberate. You're asking me to change the will. Again. Then his familiar, calculated. She won't outlive me. And when she goes, I get the rest. That's what we agreed on. I froze. Maggie sounded almost amused. That's not what we agreed. That's what you wanted. He didn't argue, just laughed. Cold, confident. She's barely holding on. Give it a year. A rustle papers may be a glass being moved. If she betrays you, Maggie's voice cut in lower now. This will find the light. The tape stopped. I exhaled only then, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Elise's voice came through the phone sharp. You realize what this is? Intent. Malicious, premeditated. He tried to manipulate her before she died. And that changes everything. I stared at the player, heart pounding. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a blueprint for it. I picked up the tape, its edges warm from my grip. Guess it's time to turn on the spotlight. I walked into that room knowing I'd never be the same when I walked out. The wood-paneled courtroom was full before I even stepped through the double doors. Faces turned, some curious, some already aligned with a side. I could feel the weight of them, each stare like a pin pressed into skin. Gregory sat at the far table, shoulders squared like he was the one under attack. Susan next to him, jaw-stiff eyes scanning the crowd for allies. Elise walked beside me, calm as always. Her folder was thin, but it held more power than anyone in this room suspected. Talia had warned me not to gloat, not even inwardly. But the tightness in my chest wasn't pride. It was grief braided with fury. We sat. The chairperson rapped the gavel. Today's hearing concerns the inheritance dispute of the late Margaret Caldwell. Counsel for the petitioners may proceed. Gregory stood, a thin stack of papers in hand. He spoke in that same artificial warmth he used at church picnics and HOA meetings. My daughter, Madison Carter, is regrettably suffering from long-term emotional instability, which has led her to mismanage the estate left by my late sister-in-law. We have grave concerns shared by several members of the community regarding her competency. He didn't look at me. Not once. He presented letters, statements from former acquaintances, medical records from years ago. Susan dabbed at her eyes like she'd rehearsed the gesture. Then it was our turn. Elise rose, spine-straight, voice cool. We submit into record the original notarized will of Margaret Caldwell dated July 2023. Additionally, we present a recording made in June 2021 between Ms. Caldwell and Mr. Gregory Carter. There was a murmur, muffled but rising like smoke. The recording began to play. Maggie's voice. You're asking me to change the will, again. Gregory's, she won't outlive me, and when she goes, I get the rest. Whispers. One man gasped. That's not what we agreed, that's what you wanted. She's barely holding on. Give it a year. When the recording ended, you could have heard a pen drop. Elise calmly handed over the original cassette and the handwriting verification. We are prepared to authenticate both. Gregory surged to his feet, face red, voice cracking. She doctored that tape. That's not my voice. This is all fake. I stood slowly. My voice didn't shake. The dead don't edit audio, Dad. He stared at me, and for the first time I saw panic creep behind his eyes. The chairperson cleared her throat. This matter will reconvene tomorrow for final deliberation. Court is adjourned. I gathered my bag and turned only to find Blake standing by the exit. He didn't say anything, so I did. You knew? The truth didn't set me free. It set the whole damn house on fire. The courtroom doors opened with a groan, and for the first time there were cameras. Not discreet ones hidden in the corner, but full-on news crews stationed behind red ropes. I barely registered the flashes. My eyes went straight to the bench. Gregory was already seated, his face a porcelain mask of calm. Susan looked worse, powdery makeup failing to hide the dark crescents beneath her eyes. Fingers clutching the edge of her purse like it was a lifeline. She didn't even glance my way. Talia joined us this time in person. Her blazer was sharp enough to cut steel, and she radiated something stronger than confident certainty. Elise nodded once to the judge as we stood. This court has reviewed the audio evidence, the original will, and the supporting testimony, the judge began. In the matter of the estate of Margaret Caldwell, this court declares Madison Carter the sole and rightful heir. A small gasp rippled across the room, but the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, based on the content of the submitted recording and the review of the financial transfers provided by Counsel Brooks, this court is referring Mr. Gregory Carter to the district attorney for investigation on the grounds of attempted embezzlement and forgery. There it was. Silence, then heat. Gregory's face drained of color. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Susan reached for his hand, eyes wide with tears. He pulled away without looking at her. The gavel came down once, twice. Court is adjourned. I didn't move right away. Just stood there letting it settle in like ash falling over a quiet forest. Outside, reporters shouted questions, microphones extending like weapons. Elise cut through them without a blink, and Talia matched her stride. She handed me a folder, her voice low and even. "We served notice this morning. They have 14 days to vacate the property. You don't need to do anything else. We'll handle the rest." I took the folder with both hands, gripping it harder than I meant to. We made it to the courthouse steps before I saw him, Blake, standing by the stone pillar, hands in the pockets of a coat too thin for February. His eyes didn't flinch. "I think," he began, voice lower than I remembered, "I need to talk to you about everything." When they stopped screaming, I knew it was over. From the ridge above the cul-de-sac, the Carter house looked smaller than I remembered. Maybe it was the moving trucks. Maybe it was the peeling edge of the gold paint on the mailbox. Or maybe it was just finally the size it had always deserved to be. The front door was propped open. I could hear Susan shouting, even from where I stood, the sound thin and stretched in the cold air. Then came the crash glass. Maybe a mirror, maybe another ornament from her curated life, followed by a sob so raw it curled like smoke into the open sky. They were emptying the house. Not just the furniture, the pride, the illusion. I stayed in the car. I didn't need to be closer. This wasn't my scene anymore. Gregory stomped down the driveway, flanked by a man in a gray suit, likely the new lawyer. He gestured wildly at a stack of papers. I didn't need to hear the words to know what they meant. He was signing over everything, under court order, under the law he thought would always protect him. The same law I used to crawl my way back. A white sedan pulled up beside the house. Blake stepped out alone. He didn't go inside. Just stood at the edge of the driveway, hands in his pockets, watching it all. I expected him to walk straight in, try to be the peacemaker again. But he didn't. Instead, he crossed the street slow, like each step had weight, and then he kept going until he stood next to my car. I rolled the window halfway. He didn't speak right away, just looked ahead at the chaos. "I didn't know," he said finally, voice low, "about the hospital, about what they said. I thought you were just distant, cold." I said nothing. "When I was 12, he continued, "I broke my arm. Dad told me not to cry or I'd be weak like you. I thought he meant it." I turned to look at him. He was older now, not just in years. Something in his shoulders had dropped the way gravity only settles in once you stop pretending it doesn't exist. "You were their shield," I said, quiet. "I was their sacrifice." He nodded slowly. "I know." We sat like that for a while, the wind lifting a piece of paper from the driveway, an invoice maybe, or an old letter weightless now. "Can I?" He started, his voice halting. "Do better now." I held his gaze. The screaming inside had stopped. Even the chaos was quieter. There was just aftermath now. Silence and dust. "You can start," I said, "by walking away." He stepped back, his eyes glancing once more toward the house. Then, without another word, he turned. And this time, he didn't look back. "She left me more than wealth. She left me the will to fight." The new office wasn't large, just one floor above a bakery in downtown Santa Rosa. The walls were white, unassuming. The desk was solid wood without polish. But sunlight streamed in through the windows in a way I hadn't felt in years, open, clean, alive. I sat with Maggie's final letter in my hands, the envelope already softened at the edges from how often I'd touched it. The handwriting was sharp, slanted, always forward, like she never had time to retreat. "They won't love you, Maddie, but they'll learn to fear your silence. That's power, too." I blinked twice, breathing in. Then I folded the letter again and placed it in the drawer. Elise entered carrying a slim folder. No dramatics, no red tape, just facts and signatures. "All assets from the estate are now fully consolidated under the Maggie Carter Foundation," she said. "Uncontested, clean." I nodded. "Then it's time." The staff had already gathered in the adjacent room, 5 people, some from Maggie's original team, others new. I'd met with them individually over the past month, talked late into the evening about what this could become. It wasn't about restoring Maggie's vision. It was about building something she'd barely had time to imagine. At the meeting, I stood before a wall where a new mission statement had been painted in broad brushstrokes. Supporting the unheard, empowering the abandoned, fighting silence with truth. No cameras, no applause, just breath, steady and shared. I spoke slowly. Sometimes, I began, inheritance isn't about what you get, it's what you become. Someone scribbled it down. Others simply nodded. We would offer legal resources, therapy referrals, financial literacy for youth cut off by their families. It would take time, the right kind. Not the kind I spent begging to be seen, but the kind you use to build a door for someone else. A few hours later, I returned to my office to find a small envelope resting on my desk. Not typed, not official. It was from Blake. His handwriting had improved since high school. Still, it wobbled in places. I'm sorry for standing still when I should have stood up. I hope you never have to forgive me, just maybe remember I tried. I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I folded it once and tucked it beside Maggie's last words. The foundation team left one by one, evening settled, and then a knock. A woman, older face weathered but kind, stood in the doorway. She didn't introduce herself right away. Just stepped inside and whispered, "You don't know me, but Maggie saved my life once. ChatGPT Danoy." They never said goodbye. That's fine. I never said where I was going. The fog curled like breath around the small station's wooden beams, softening every edge. It was quiet even for a Sunday morning. No announcements, no chatter, just the low hum of the next train pulling into view and the distant click of luggage wheels on concrete. I sat on a bench near the far end, coat zipped up, gloves in my lap, a slim leather satchel beside me. Inside it, everything I still needed: a notebook, 2 letters and a one-way ticket with no assigned seat. Behind me, Elise stood near the platform entrance. She didn't wave. That wasn't our style. But I saw her nod once, slow knowing, and then turn walking away before the train arrived. I'd left the mansion keys on her desk that morning. No letter, no note. Just a folded slip that read, "What begins with survival doesn't have to end in bitterness." The foundation would continue. The new board was in place. My name was already off the paperwork. I checked my phone once more. One new message from Talia. Run the world, quietly. I smiled and powered it off. A boy, maybe 7 or 8, climbed onto the bench beside me. He had a small backpack shaped like a fox and clutched a well-worn comic book. He didn't look up right away, just swung his legs and hummed softly to himself. Then, without warning, he turned and said, "This is the station my mom used to take me to when I was little. We'd pretend the fog made everything invisible." I glanced down at him, startled, then let out a soft breath. "Did you like that?" I asked. He nodded. It made me feel like we could go anywhere. I looked out over the tracks where the fog parted just slightly to show the edge of the approaching train. "Yeah," I murmured. "Anywhere sounds about right." The train came to a slow halt, its brakes sighing like something relieved. I stood lifting my bag, heart steady. As I stepped onto the train car, I didn't look back. The platform faded into the mist before I reached the seat. I didn't leave a headline. I didn't slam a door. I just left, slid into a window seat, leaned back, and let my breath fall into rhythm with the tracks. I didn't disappear. I reclaimed my life. Quietly. Entirely. A few minutes later, the ticket inspector approached. She wore a navy coat and a practiced smile. "Name?" she asked, pen poised above the pad. I paused, thought for just a moment, then smiled. "Just call me M." They never apologized. Not for the silence, not for the years they let me shrink inside a family portrait where I was never really drawn in. They never asked what it felt like to open my eyes in that hospital and realize no one had come, that the machines beeped louder than their absence, that my body had fought for its life while they weighed the cost of saving it. They didn't even flinch when I made it back, as if surviving had been the problem all along. But I remembered. Every skipped dinner, every shut door, every sideways glance that said I was too much and never enough. I remembered how they wrapped their neglect in polite smiles, called it tough love, and watched me fall alone. So I stood up. Not with screaming, not with fists. I used the thing they never thought I'd keep: the truth. Tucked in letters buried in tapes signed in ink they forgot to read. I became fluent in the very language they used to erase me: legal clauses, interest rates, fine print. I found allies in places they dismissed. Talia Elise, Aunt Maggie's quiet loyalty folded into every detail she left behind. When the courtroom doors closed that final day and they realized I'd won, I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just walked out. Because the victory wasn't about defeating them, it was about reclaiming the self they tried to discard. Gregory lost his composure. Susan lost her mask. Blake, he stood somewhere in between, shaking with all the things he had once refused to see. I didn't pity them. I didn't need to. The world did what I never could. It showed them what it felt like to be powerless. And when the verdict came, when the judge said my name without hesitation, when the inheritance was mine and their accusations fell apart under the weight of evidence they couldn't destroy, I felt something settle. Not triumph, not vengeance, just clarity. I left Santa Rosa without telling anyone. The foundation would run itself. Maggie's legacy reborn under a new name. A place for every forgotten daughter, every boy thrown aside, every young soul who knew the weight of being unchosen. I didn't need a plaque. I didn't need a monument. I needed peace. And I gave it to myself. And what can be learned from this? Not all victories roar. Some arrive on paper in silence, in the unwavering gaze of someone who refused to stay small. The world is full of people who will try to bury your truth beneath their version of the story. But truth has a memory, and time, though slow, is a faithful ally of the brave. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but once it echoes, it never fades. And no wall of lies can stand forever against the tide of quiet, relentless truth. So if the world shuts the door, don't beg to be let in. Build a different door. Open it for yourself. Then leave it open for the ones who come next. Thank you for listening to my story, a journey that didn't begin with vengeance, but with silence. And it didn't end with applause, but with the decision to keep going on my own terms. I used to think I had to be perfect to be loved, that I had to stay quiet to be accepted. But the truth is, my existence never needed anyone's permission. The people who walked away didn't turn me into a victim. They simply helped me realize the worth of someone forgotten and how to never forget myself again. I didn't come back to reclaim love. I didn't fight with tears or anger. I fought with proof, with the law, with the documents they signed but never bothered to read. I don't need them to admit they were wrong. I just need them to stand on the sidelines, watching me move forward, powerless to stop me. If you've ever been hurt by your own family, cut out of dinners, calls, or decisions that should have included you, then this story is for you. Not to reopen wounds, but to remind you you still have a choice. You can still rewrite the rest of your story. And if you're standing in the middle of silence, injustice, or erasure, don't give up. The people who thought they ended your story, they don't get to write the ending. Leave a comment below if you've ever walked away from something painful and chose yourself instead. Don't forget to like this video to support the channel, and subscribe so you won't miss more stories that are raw and real, but always laced with hope. Because sometimes, the most powerful endings don't come with applause. They come when you refuse to bow as you walk away. See you on the next journey. I'm Sora Carter, and this time, I chose my way home. My name is Natalie Wren. I'm 30 years old, and for the past 5 years, I've been the invisible architect behind my family's fashion empire. Designs? Mine. Vendor contracts? Mine. The very fabrics Chloe parades down runways? All mine. And yet, my name? Nowhere. The last time they left me off a guest list, I stood outside, heels sinking into pavement, listening to them toast Chloe's genius through glass doors I wasn't allowed to walk through. I swallowed my pride, smiled through tears, and told myself, next time, it'll be different. Tonight was that next time. Except this time, I didn't wait for an invitation. I walked straight past the doorman with a QR code that wasn't even meant for me. I stood in their ballroom, under their chandeliers, and I watched them celebrate my designs with someone else's name on them. What happened after? Changed everything. Before I continue, tell me, have you ever been erased from something you built? Leave a comment where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever been left out, overlooked, or underestimated by your own family. The last time this happened, I stood outside the glass-paneled doors of the Wren family's private event hall, heels sinking into the pavement, invitation mysteriously misplaced. Inside, I could hear them toasting Chloe's brilliance, her rise, her glow. And somewhere in those cheers, I heard the echo of my own designs, my own words, parroted back with someone else's name attached. Tonight, I didn't stand on the sidewalk. I passed the doorman with a smile and a QR code that wasn't meant for me. It belonged to a certain Nora Wells, a freelance editor who'd never confirmed her RSVP. Her digital pass had landed in my inbox thanks to a mistyped email. A small glitch, one I decided not to correct. Inside the Lafayette Grand Ballroom, everything shimmered. Gold-accented moldings stretched across the ceiling like vines, crystal chandeliers reflected in marble floors, velvet drapes pooled like ink at every corner. It was elegance, manufactured, rehearsed, a stage, and not a single sign that I had ever existed. I lingered behind a gilded pillar near the back, the perfect vantage point. Waiters glided past with trays of rosé and orchid-laced amuse-bouche. Cameras flashed in controlled bursts, chasing Chloe's every smile. She stood in the center of it all, wrapped in a champagne silk column dress that curved around her like water. The original mind behind our Fall 2024 line. Elaine cooed into the mic, gesturing to her daughter with a reverence usually reserved for saints. That dress? I sketched it 2 years ago. I still remembered the fabric swatches I'd paired with that design, down to the mohair piping and diagonal drape that made it hang just so. But on Chloe, it was now called the Artemis. No attribution, no nod. Elaine, my mother, smiled wide as applause filled the room. Chloe's vision is unmatched. She has this innate ability to sense what women will want before they even do. Her words had a rhythm I recognized. I'd heard her use them once, on a podcast, when she introduced me as her secret weapon, back when I was still on the board, before the silence. They had scrubbed me well, from the press releases, from the website bios, from company archives, even the shareholders list. Clean, clinical, but not from the back end. I slipped my phone from my clutch, tilting it low under the tablecloth of an empty booth near the bar. A few taps brought me to the Ardent dashboard, the logistics platform still linked to my personal business account. Something they never bothered to change after freezing me out. Shipment number CWS-F 2024. Still pending. A collection of 35 bolts of Italian wool, dyed in exclusive colors only I had the vendor contract for. Due for delivery in 3 days. I hovered over the pause order button. Across the room, Chloe laughed into Mason Hall's ear. His laugh was hollow, quick, strategic. Chloe didn't notice the photographer angling a mirror shot that caught the edge of my reflection. I tapped. Pause order. All active Chloe Wren studio accounts. Just like that, the wheels slowed. No announcement, no crash. Not yet. But without that shipment, their fall preview production would stall. Media deadlines would slip. Fashion Week samples wouldn't make the runway. And investors? They didn't like delays. I slid the phone back into my clutch and stood. I didn't need to see the rest. Didn't need to hear the toast to family legacy or the faux humble nod Chloe would give when someone inevitably mentioned her meteoric rise. I left the gala before they noticed. But they'd notice soon enough, when the fabric never arrived. I signed away everything I built, over coffee and a lie. Back then, I was running on 2 hours of sleep, 4 rejection emails, and the last flicker of a dream that refused to die. The dream had a name: Wren Studio.